Good afternoon. We are back with a new name, by the way, if you notice the little thing just right down there. I, I've been sitting here thinking for a while, we don't actually really eat lunch during this Bible study, so it just never, it wasn't making sense to call it lunch in the word Bible study. So I decided to change the name of it to something that fits a little bit better with our actual focus as a Bible study. And so our new name now is CrossFocus Bible Study, because we want to focus on that cross. We want to see Christ and his cross in all of the scriptures. And the reason we want to do that is because, well, that's what the scripture is about. And if we're doing that, we're not going to be making the mistakes of reading ourselves into the Bible where we shouldn't be, and we'll be seeing what God has been intending for us to see all along, as Jesus pointed out to his followers as they were walking on the road to Emmaus. It's about him. It is about the work that he has done, that he is accomplishing for us, and his renewal of all creation through his sacrifice. So, hence the new name, Cross-Focus Bible Study. So there can be no question what we're looking for when we look into the Bible. All right. Speaking of Bible, let's get into the Bible. I promise we get into chapter 12 today, and I want to make sure I can uphold that promise. So let's begin. Let's pray. Blessed Lord, you have caused all holy scriptures to be written for our learning. Grant that we may so hear them, read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest them, that by patience and comfort of your holy word we may embrace and ever hold fast the blessed hope of everlasting life. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay, so last week we were dealing with the tail end of a vision that Ezekiel had. It was a prophetic vision, one that God had given to him, where he had taken him to Jerusalem, to the temple, showed him all these 4 different abominations that were happening around the temple, and pronounced his judgment against them. But at the same time, he pronounced his salvation of his people, that he is indeed not going to destroy his people, but he will preserve for himself a remnant. And at the same time, he's showing how he's destroying the evil, and he's also preserving his people. And so we get this nice little chiastic structure centered around the theme of salvation and judgment, which are 2 themes that, they go together. If there's no judgment, there is no salvation. And, salvation doesn't really mean there's going to be judgment, but, they do go together. And anyhow, he's brought back, released from the vision, however you really want to look at it, because both fit with what the text speaks to us as he's transitioning, and he's preached this to the people in Chaldea, Babylon, and let them know that these things are going to continue to happen in the Jerusalem area. Jerusalem is going to ultimately fall. And yes, they've already been beaten once, and all people of note have been taken out of there, and, well, now Babylon's going to go back and beat up on them some more, is basically what's going to happen. And all these things are going to happen to the people who were orchestrating and perpetuating and doing the abominations, and God will preserve his people. Now, we're getting into another prophecy. We just have this really short segue between, okay, I'm back, went and preached, and now we go into another prophecy. This time, rather than a vision, we're back to one of those object lesson prophecies, where he is called upon to act out the prophecy. And so, without further ado, let's hear what this prophecy is going to be. Ezekiel chapter 12, verses 1 through 7. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, you dwell in the midst of a rebellious house, who have eyes to see but see not, who have ears to hear but hear not. They are a rebellious house. As for you, son of man, prepare for yourself an exile's baggage, and go into exile by day in their sight. You shall go like an exile from your place to another place in their sight. Perhaps they will understand, though they are a rebellious house. You shall bring out your baggage by day in their sight as baggage for exile, and you shall go out yourself at evening in their sight, as those who must go into exile. In their sight, dig through the wall and bring your baggage out through it. In their sight, you shall lift the baggage upon your shoulder and carry it out at dusk. You shall cover your face that you may not see the land, for I have made you a sign for the house of Israel. And I did as I was commanded. I brought out my baggage by day, as baggage for exile, and in the evening I dug through the wall with my own hands. I brought out my baggage at dusk, carrying it on my shoulder in their sight. Okay, so Ezekiel is given this fairly simple command. He's to pack a bag, carry it kind of sort of around town with him during the day so everybody can see him. And then in the evening he's supposed to leave. And of course he doesn't get to leave through an exit. No, he has to go through the wall. It's if he were somebody sneaking out of the city, which would fit if you're somebody who's trying to escape from a siege. You can't go out through the gate because the army's sitting there waiting for you by the gate, and so you go through another way. Of course, I can't imagine trying to dig through a wall with my bare hands. I'm hoping that is a figure of speech, because even as I was reading that, my skin's crawling. Because I'm thinking of just messing with fingernails is just one of those things that yeah. I want to say it's like fingernails across a chalkboard, but it's just, yeah. So he basically has to play out going out into exile. It's essentially what he is going to end up doing, and this is going to be explained, is he's going to be giving a prophecy for Jerusalem. So this is kind of a continuation of the prophecy that was given in the vision, where he sees that Jerusalem is going to end up falling in a very ultimate fashion. But it's also for the people in Chaldea, so that they can know that things are still happening. And so he's given this command to go out and around town. Now, as far as it goes, it's a fairly simple one. If you're wondering, an exile's baggage it's a backpack. I have seen it translated as knapsack, or sometimes you'll see it translated as backpack. So basically what he's doing is he's taking his cloth and he's wrapping necessary stuff inside it, and then tying it around himself. And you probably have seen something of what it might look like in the movies, where you've got guys who are traveling, and maybe it's some of the movies that are set in a historical period where they don't have, say, backpacks as we know them, so they make a makeshift pack out of a sheet or a shirt or something that they have on hand, and so that's what he was supposed to do. So he's packing the essentials. He's packing just like an exile would, somebody who's got to leave really quickly. And you don't get a whole lot of choice in what you get to take. You're going to take the things that you need and maybe a couple of mementos, because you're not going to be able to take a whole bunch of stuff with you. And then he goes parading around the town so everybody can see, and all the while God's going, well, they might understand it, but you're supposed to go do this anyways. And so he goes and he's going to go do it, and he does do it. But why is he giving a prophecy regarding Jerusalem to the people in Chaldea? A lot of it, I think, has to do with the idea that they're a rebellious house. And we're going to get into that here in a bit as to what exactly that's going to mean, but it does give us clues as to why to these folks. You think it would make more sense that he would give prophecies concerning Jerusalem to people in Jerusalem. Granted, Ezekiel's not in Jerusalem. A little hard to do. So why to the people in Chaldea? I mean, this isn't exactly a message of hope to the Chaldeans, which would make sense if he was to be prophesying to the Chaldeans, but that's only if we're looking at it through not the right point of view. And the right point of view is he's supposed to be giving this prophecy to people who are considered rebellious and stiff-necked and, yes, the familiar phrase, who have eyes to see but do not see, and who have ears to hear but hear not. This is, as much as it's about Jerusalem, it is a prophecy of my mind just went blank.
More of a warning.
Yeah, it's very much a warning. Yeah, it is a warning prophecy. Not that you're about to come into more trouble, but it's it's a judgment prophecy. It's pronouncing judgment, in that yes, you've been spared the worst of it by being brought out. In a sense, you've been spared the worst of it because, well, you're captive in a foreign land, separated from home and possibly kin, but at least you're not starving. But it is also a pronouncement of judgment. He's making a judgment on these people, and he's going to explain what that means here in a bit. Rather than me just kind of beat around the bush, why don't we just go ahead and head into that passage where he is describing what he means by all of this. All right, we're going to pick up at verse 8. So after he's done all this, he's gone through the city, he's worn his backpack, he's dug through the wall, and he's now getting this vision. Excuse me, not this vision. God is explaining stuff to him. In the morning, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, has not the house of Israel, the rebellious house, said to you, what are you doing? Say to them, thus says the Lord God, this oracle concerns the prince in Jerusalem, and that all the house of Israel who are in it. Say, I am a sign for you. As I have done, so shall it be done to them. They shall go into exile, into captivity. And the prince who is among them shall lift his baggage upon his shoulder at dusk and shall go out. They shall dig through the wall to bring him out through it. He shall cover his face, that he may not see the land with his eyes. And I will spread my net over him, and he shall be taken in my snare. And I will bring him to Babylon, to the land of the Chaldeans, yet he shall not see it, and he shall die there. And I will scatter toward every wind all who are with him, his helpers and all his troops, and I will unsheathe the sword after them. And they shall know that I am the Lord when I disperse them among the nations and scatter them among the countries. But I will let a few of them escape from the sword, from famine and pestilence, that they may declare all their abominations among the nations where they go, and may know that I am the Lord. So the whole thing God makes clear is, with the backpack and the wandering about, is that it is a reference to the prince and the house of Israel in Jerusalem. And that they're about to go into exile and they're going to be scattered all over the place, and of course the prince is going to die. Now, it is interesting that he refers to the prince, because there is a king in Judah, in Jerusalem, at that moment in time. Lining up everything between Ezekiel and a couple of the other prophets and what we know from history, that would be Zedekiah. Now, Zedekiah was a puppet king. He was the king who was placed upon the throne in Jerusalem after Babylon carted off all the nobility and important people when they laid siege and busted up Jerusalem before. They left behind a friendly king, and that would be Zedekiah. So the fact that he's being referred to as prince does raise some questions. The obvious answer is that nobody recognizes Zedekiah as the rightful king, which would be fitting with some of the wording that we have in Jeremiah. We do have, and the ways that Ezekiel refers to Jehoiakim, that he was still considered the rightful king of Judah even when he was in exile. So it's definitely an obvious answer right there that, well, he's not really the king, because the real king's here in Chaldea, in Babylon. The other thing that this raises a question of is, if you're familiar with Old Testament history, particularly the history that is given within Joshua, Judges, and 1 Samuel, for the longest time Israel didn't have a king, and the reason they didn't have a king was because God was considered the king. He was the ruler of Israel, so they had no need for an earthly king. He just had people that he had called into offices to uphold his rule. And then Samuel the prophet is begged to go to God and tell him, we want a king, and so God says, okay, but I'm still going to be the ruler of this all, even though you're going to have a king. So he's going to be a king, but not a king, which is actually partly where the reference King of Kings comes, and for God as a way of referring to him. He's the King of Kings, which means he's the King of the kings of Israel and, well, everything. Ultimate ruler. So it also could, the fact that Ezekiel is referring to Zedekiah as a prince could also be referring to that idea that the only true king in Jerusalem and in Israel is God himself. And so we could see that too within this phrase. It's not nearly as strong a possibility as the idea that Jehoiakim was still recognized as king of Judah, and simply because of some of the context from Jeremiah, another prophet who was writing during this time. But at the same time, we can't ignore it, because the theological implications of the idea that the only rightful king is God himself. So we end up with this very interesting passage that could have a couple of meanings for us. Um, I'm going to go ahead and say that it's a both and. It is a recognition that Jehoiakim is the actual earthly king, but at the same time, the only true king is God. There is also a third possibility in that the only true king of Israel would be the son of David, which of course gives us some very uh, eschatological meanings, end times, and also, well, messianic meaning, in that with the idea of Jesus, the son of David, ultimately ascending to his throne, and which would mean any king that is currently sitting on the throne is only a pretender. And that would even include Jehoiakim, who is named king, though he is a son of David in that he's descended of David's line. But even though he is descended of David's line, he is also not the true king. So in a sense, at the same time, we could also look at Jehoiakim as leading towards that, the true son of David taking the throne, with the son of David already on the throne. That could be part of it. Maybe, and at the same time, I just warn, just maybe we're reading too much into it, but we can't ignore the fact that he keeps referring to this Zedekiah as prince. It means something. And honest, all three of those they are good, safe ways of reading this. One is we've got textual evidence that goes, okay, yeah, Jehoiakim was still considered the true king, even though Zedekiah was sitting on the throne. We have that in the other books. And at the same time, we also know the history where there's no true king but God. And at the same time, we also know the prophecy that it is going to be a son of David who ultimately sits upon that throne forever. And so the true king of Israel would be that son of David. And of course, we could put all that together and go, and the true king is going to be God himself in flesh. So, so taking all of these together really does safely mesh together with the text. So even if I may be reading a little bit too much into it, it's a safe reading. So, all right, moving forward, and wow, I managed to go on for a long time concerning all of that. Anyhow, so we've got this prophecy. Jerusalem's going to fall. The prince is going to fall. He's going to go out. He's actually going to die. The pretender to the throne is going to die. And everybody else is going to be scattered, and the few will survive just so that they can pronounce God's judgment, basically. And which is an interesting tidbit, because why would they be going out amongst all the nations to proclaim that judgment? Could it have something to do with the fact the exiles are already amongst all the nations, and the exiles have something they need to hear? This is why I said that they are a rebellious people is an important clue when God is giving Ezekiel the charge to go do this. Even though they have been sent off, even though they could be construed as the remnant that God is going to preserve as he destroys this country that had been blessed with his gifts, have been given of his riches and his presence, and the message of forgiveness and restoration had rebelled and he destroyed it. They could, in a sense, start thinking of themselves as, oh, God likes us because we're better than those people. And they could conceivably think of that, because even though they're in exile, even though they're going through some hardships, and even though they got to put up with some stupid kings and their idiotic edicts about worshiping them and things like that, we see that in Daniel. And of course, those idiot kings tend to be a little lethal. It's a bad thing, so I don't want to make light of it. Um, Even though they're putting up with that, they could still see themselves as doing better than the folks who are getting destroyed now because, well, they're not being destroyed. um, God is making it absolutely clear. You're still sinners. This, what is happening in Jerusalem, is judgment against the abominations and the things that they are working there, but it is also a warning and judgment against you, that you are also guilty, that there is no such thing as anybody innocent in all of this. And so this prophecy is making it absolutely clear that everybody falls under God's judgment. It doesn't matter if you're exile or not. You are under his judgment. There is not a single one considered good. In fact, we could actually look at this and just simply see Ezekiel is acting out what Paul will later record in his letter to the Romans, as he's going through the diagnostic portion of his letter and saying that every single person is evil in God's sight because of sin, that there is no such thing as an innocent man. And that stands in absolute contradiction to how we think as a people. We think that there is a such thing as an innocent man, and that's just simply a myth. There is no such thing as an innocent man, and God is just driving that home. No one is innocent. Every single one of you stands guilty. You might be spared from this particular judgment, but you are still guilty, and your only hope is in the gifts that I have to offer, and I'm going to break you of your self-righteousness so that you can see that. And that is what this prophecy is a breaking of self-righteousness. Just because you've been spared the sword doesn't mean you've been spared judgment. You are guilty. So basically God is saying there's no such thing as an innocent man. And I know that's going to rub people wrong because everybody likes to think of themselves as basically good people. I don't blame them. It's the only way we could survive if we think of ourselves as basically good people in many senses, because otherwise, to do anything else in our state would be to give into despair. But at the same time, honestly, we need to be despairing of ourselves because really we're pretty horrible people. I mean, outwardly we might act nice to everybody around, but inwardly we are absolutely destructive, evil, rotten to the core people. And I heard a great illustration earlier as I was listening to somebody else today, where he was talking about how he, in this confrontation during a traffic incident, was outwardly calm, but inwardly all he could think of was, just blasting the man. I'm not going to leave it as colorful as he did, but it gives truth, though, to what God is saying here. There is no such thing as an innocent man. Every single one of you stands guilty. And your only hope is in redemption, not in anything you can do. You can't be good enough. And while you're here in Chaldea, don't think you're being spared because you're somehow better than they are. You are just as guilty. And that's why I think that this prophecy is ultimately given to the Chaldeans as opposed to the Jerusalemites, the people living in Jerusalem. So the way we can understand this is God is taking this event that is happening, this act of judgment in Jerusalem, and using it to illustrate how these people over here are also guilty. And with that, we are out of time. I hate ending on this note. We're all guilty. I don't mean to make, and I'm not trying to make light of it. We just all are. Once we get that through our head, that is one of the greatest things we could ever realize. We are all guilty. When we are finally driven to that point of realization that there is nothing good in us, that is a blessed event for us, because that is the point at which the Holy Spirit is can does give to us that blessed hope of redemption through the all-availing sacrifice of Christ, the true King of Kings and the Son of David who is to come. Anyhow, that's of course not a direct part of this text, but this text leads to that because it gets across that point. We're all guilty. Don't forget, next week I'm not going to be online because I'm going to be on the road. I have a pastor's conference next week, and just timing's not going to work out for me to be able to be online. But we'll be back the following week, and we'll pick right up where we left off. So there'll be Ezekiel chapter 12, verse 17. Make sure that I have the right verse here. All right, and until then, blessings. Again, if you got questions, need answers, don't hesitate to ask them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, join our circle or whatever it is on Google Plus. I don't Google Plus that much, but I just like using the Hangout. All right, until then, blessings.